David Harrison had heard every kind of business pitch in his corner office, but nothing prepared him for the question whispered at a bakery counter on a quiet Friday afternoon. "Do you have an expired cake for my daughter?" The words sliced through the warm air, through the scent of vanilla and cinnamon, straight into a memory he'd buried 15 years deep. He looked up from his laptop, his $5,000 suit suddenly feeling too tight, too expensive, too much. The woman's voice was steady, but her hands weren't. $3 bills clutched between shaking fingers, a daughter's birthday tomorrow, and a mother's dignity hanging by a thread. He had built an empire, owned properties across 3 states, but in that moment, he was 25 again, standing in this exact bakery, asking this exact question for his own son. The young cashier looked confused, the mother looked broken, and David Harrison, the single-father billionaire who had everything, realized he'd been waiting 15 years to pay back a kindness he'd never forgotten. Some debts, he understood now, are meant to be paid forward. The afternoon light filtered through the windows of Sweet Haven Bakery in soft golden streaks, catching dust motes that danced above display cases filled with pastries most people in this neighborhood couldn't afford every day. David had chosen this corner table deliberately, the same spot where he used to sit during his breaks 15 years ago when he washed dishes in the back kitchen for $7 an hour. Back then, he'd been a 25-year-old single father with a 2-year-old son, a studio apartment with a leaking ceiling, and dreams that seemed as distant as the expensive cakes behind the glass. Now he came here once a week, laptop open, coffee growing cold, pretending to work while really just remembering who he used to be. The bakery had changed owners twice, been renovated 3 times, but Mrs. Anderson still ran it, still remembered every struggling parent who walked through that door. Sarah Miller had been standing outside for almost 10 minutes before she finally pushed the door open. David noticed because he'd learned to notice hesitation, the body language of someone gathering courage for something difficult. She wore a jacket that had seen too many winters, carried a purse with a broken strap held together by safety pins, and had the particular exhaustion in her eyes that came from working multiple jobs and still falling short. He recognized it because he'd seen it in his own mirror once, in another lifetime. She approached the counter slowly, each step seeming to cost her something, and when she spoke, her voice was so quiet that the young cashier had to lean forward to hear. "Excuse me," Sarah said, and David's fingers froze on his keyboard. "Do you have any expired cakes for my daughter's birthday tomorrow?" The question hung in the air like a prayer no one knew how to answer. Jessica, the 20-year-old cashier with purple highlights and a name tag that still looked new, blinked in confusion, her mouth opening and closing without sound. David felt his chest tighten, felt 15 years collapse into a single moment. He remembered standing exactly where Sarah stood now, remembered the weight of his own son's expectations, remembered the shame of having to ask for day-old bread and damaged goods. Sarah continued, her voice stronger now, as if saying it once had broken through some barrier. "I work 2 jobs, but rent went up last month, and I've been trying to save, but—" She stopped, swallowed, started again. "My daughter, she's turning 7 tomorrow. She's never asked for much, never complains. But she told her classmates her mom would make her birthday special, and I just—" The $3 bills in her hand trembled. "I know it's not enough for a real cake. I understand if you can't help. I just thought maybe something that's about to be thrown away anyway." Jessica looked stricken, her young face showing she'd never encountered this kind of desperation before, had no script for it. No training module that covered what to do when poverty walked in wearing a mother's face. I don't know if we have," she stammered, glancing toward the back, clearly hoping someone more experienced would materialize. David's hands had moved to the edge of his laptop, his entire body tensed, The memory was so sharp, now it cut. His son Jake's 5th birthday. Standing in this exact spot. Asking Mrs. Anderson the same question in almost the same words. The crushing weight of failing your child before they were old enough to understand that sometimes love isn't enough when the world runs on money you don't have. The bell above the door chimed as another customer entered, and Sarah's shoulders drew up, her face coloring with shame at being overheard. "Just never mind," she said quickly, already turning. "I'm sorry for bothering you. I'll figure something out." But before she could take another step, a door at the back of the bakery swung open, and Mrs. Anderson emerged, flour dusting her silver hair, her reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain around her neck. Mrs. Anderson was 73 years old and had owned Sweet Haven for 46 years. She'd seen 3 recessions, countless personal tragedies, and more struggling families than she could count. Her eyes, sharp and kind in equal measure, took in the scene immediately. The trembling mother, the confused cashier, and in the corner, David Harrison frozen with recognition. "Sarah Miller," Mrs. Anderson said, though they'd never met, saying the name like a blessing. "I heard what you asked for. Let me see what I can do." She moved behind the counter with the steady authority of someone who'd made 1,000 difficult decisions and learned to live with all of them. David watched Sarah's face transform, hope and disbelief warring across her features. "I can pay," Sarah said quickly, holding out the $3 like they were gold. "It's not much, but it's something. I'm not asking for charity." The words came out with a fierce dignity that David felt in his bones. He'd said almost the exact same thing to Mrs. Anderson 15 years ago, had needed to preserve some scrap of self-respect, even while asking for help. Mrs. Anderson took the bills gently, her weathered hands careful not to touch Sarah's trembling fingers. "Let me check inventory," she said, her tone betraying nothing. "Jessica, come help me in back for a moment." As the two disappeared through the swinging door, Sarah stood alone at the counter, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her dignity together by force of will. David's fingers had moved to his phone, then stopped, his coffee cup, then stopped. Every instinct screamed at him to do something, but the memory of his own pride held him back. He'd been in Sarah's position. He knew how easily help could feel like humiliation if it wasn't offered right. The door to the back swung open again, and Mrs. Anderson emerged alone, her expression thoughtful. "Sarah," she said, and there was something in her tone that made everyone in the small bakery pay attention. "We do have policies about expired goods and health codes. I can't just give you something past date. Much as I might want to." Sarah's face fell, and David saw her nod, saw her preparing to leave with whatever remained of her composure. But Mrs. Anderson wasn't finished. "However," she continued, and Sarah's eyes snapped back up, "I do have a cake that was ordered for today and never picked up. Customer never called, never paid. It's going to sit here overnight and be waste by morning anyway. I could sell it to you. $3 seems fair for something that's just taking up space." The lie was beautiful in its simplicity, and David felt something in his chest crack open. He knew there was no unpicked cake, knew Mrs. Anderson would bake something fresh tonight on her own time, would package it carefully, would write "Happy Birthday" in her perfect script. He knew because she'd done the same thing for him 15 years ago. Sarah's hands went to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears she was clearly fighting not to shed in front of strangers. Are you sure?" she whispered. "I don't want to take advantage." Mrs. Anderson's smile was gentle. "You're not taking anything that wasn't already lost, dear. Consider it a business transaction. Now, tell me about your daughter. What's her name? What is she like?" And just like that, the transaction became something else, became two women talking about a child's birthday, became normal and human and dignified. Sarah's voice, when she answered, was thick with emotion but steadier. Her name is Emma. She's 7 tomorrow. She loves butterflies and the color purple, and a tear escaped, tracked down her cheek. She tells everyone her mama can make wishes come true. I just want to prove her right this once. David's vision blurred, and he realized he was crying silently, tears running unchecked down his face. Jake had said almost the same thing at 5 years old. Daddy always finds a way. The faith in those words had been crushing and beautiful and terrifying. Mrs. Anderson was nodding, already writing notes on her order pad. Purple butterflies. I can do that. Come by tomorrow around 2 o'clock. I'll have it ready. She pushed the $3 back across the counter. You know what? Consider this one on the house. Early birthday present from Sweet Haven to Emma. But Sarah pushed the money back with the same fierce pride. No, you said $3. That's what I'm paying. Please. Mrs. Anderson, who understood pride better than most, took the bills with a respectful nod. $3 it is. Business transaction, like I said. Sarah clutched her purse, her whole body seeming to vibrate with emotion she was holding back. Thank you, she managed. You don't know what this means. Sarah turned to leave, and David's hand was already moving to his phone. He watched her walk out, watched her shoulders shake once she was past the window, watched her sit on the bus stop bench and put her face in her hands for just a moment before straightening up, wiping her eyes, becoming strong again because she had to be. And David Harrison, who had a meeting with investors in 2 hours, who had a portfolio worth more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes, made a decision. He closed his laptop, picked up his phone, and walked to the counter where Mrs. Anderson was still standing, watching him with knowing eyes. Mrs. Boy Anderson, he said quietly, and she smiled like she'd been waiting for this moment for 15 years. David Harrison, I was wondering when you'd say something. Saw you notice the moment she walked in. He had the grace to look embarrassed. I wasn't sure if you'd remember me. Her laugh was soft. Remember you? Boy, I remember every person I've ever helped, and every person who came back to pay it forward. You've done well for yourself. She gestured at his suit, his watch, the obvious markers of success. David's throat tightened. I want to help. That woman, Sarah. But I don't know how without taking away the dignity she's fighting so hard to keep. Mrs. Anderson's expression turned thoughtful. That's the trick, isn't it? Helping people who need it while letting them keep their pride. David leaned against the counter, his voice dropping even lower. 15 years ago, you helped me. I had nothing. I was washing dishes here, trying to build a tech startup in whatever hours I wasn't working or parenting. I asked you for day-old bread, and you gave me a birthday cake for Jake's 5th birthday. You said a customer didn't pick it up. I knew it was a lie, but you let me keep my dignity by accepting it. Mrs. Anderson's eyes grew misty. You were so young, so determined. I saw something in you, David. Saw you were going to make it if someone just gave you a little breathing room. David covered her hand with his, overwhelmed by gratitude. I never forgot. So I started working here on Fridays, being present, hoping maybe I'd see a chance to pass it on. Mrs. Anderson nodded slowly. And today you did. That woman, Sarah, she's exactly where you were. David's mind was already working through possibilities. I want to really help her. But if I just offer money, she'll refuse. I saw her face. She's got that same fierce pride I had. Mrs. Anderson was quiet for a moment. Then her face lit up. What if it wasn't charity? What if it was business? Your boy Jake, he's got a birthday coming up next month, doesn't he? 10 years old. What if you hired Sarah to plan it? That's real work, legitimate employment. She'd be earning money, and you'd be getting actual value. The brilliance of it hit David all at once. She'd have to say yes. It's a job offer, a genuine transaction. Mrs. Anderson smiled like a conspirator. That woman just spent her last $3 trying to make her daughter's birthday magical. You think she doesn't know how to make something special from nothing? David felt a laugh bubbling up, part relief and part joy at the elegant solution. You're right. But how do I approach her without being weird? Mrs. Anderson considered this. What if I'm the one who makes the introduction? I could tell her I know someone looking for help with a party. Keep it casual. Then you just happen to be here tomorrow when she picks up the cake. Natural meeting. It could work. It gave Sarah agency, gave her the chance to accept or refuse based on merit, not pity. Okay, David said, feeling the rightness of it settle into his bones. Let's do that. But the cake, I want to pay for the real cost, not $3. And I want it to be spectacular. Mrs. Anderson's smile widened. Already planning on it, dear. I'll stay late tonight. Make something that little Emma will remember for the rest of her life. David left the bakery feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose beyond profit. Connection beyond networking. The satisfaction of being able to help someone the way he'd once been helped. That evening, David looked up Sarah online. Night shifts at County General as a janitor. Day shifts at a grocery store as a cashier. Single mother. No child support. No family nearby. 32 years old and working full-time since 18. She was exactly as alone as David had been. Exactly as determined. Exactly as close to breaking. He closed the laptop quickly, not wanting to invade her privacy further, but he'd seen enough to know that what he was planning to offer could genuinely help without being overwhelming. The next day, David arrived at Sweet Haven at 1:30. Mrs. Anderson greeted him with a knowing smile and led him to the back to see the cake. It was 3 tiers of purple perfection, covered in delicate fondant butterflies that looked like they might take flight. Happy birthday, Emma, was written in elegant script. Mrs. Anderson, David breathed. This is incredible. She shook her head firmly. No such thing as too much when it comes to making a child feel special. David paid her the real cost plus extra for staying late, and then he waited at his usual corner table, heart hammering. At precisely 2 o'clock, the bell chimed, and Sarah Miller walked in with Emma by her side. The little girl was small for 7, with her mother's eyes and a butterfly clip in her dark hair, wearing a dress that had been carefully mended at the hem. She was practically vibrating with excitement, chattering about her birthday party tomorrow at school. Sarah looked exhausted, but her eyes were bright with determination, and she held Emma's hand like it was her anchor to the world. Jessica called them over, and David watched Sarah's face as Mrs. Anderson brought out the cake. Watched shock become disbelief, become overwhelming emotion. Sarah's hand went to her mouth, and tears started streaming down her face. This can't be. I paid $3. This is too much. Emma, oblivious to her mother's distress, let out a shriek of pure joy. Mama, look, it's purple. It's got butterflies. It's the most beautiful cake in the whole world. The little girl was jumping up and down, her face radiant. Mrs. Anderson came around the counter and took Sarah's hands. Sweetheart, you ordered a cake. I made a cake. Business transaction, like we agreed. Sarah was shaking her head. But this must cost. I can't accept. Mrs. Anderson's voice was gentle but firm. What's not right is a child not feeling special on her birthday. You wanted to give your daughter a birthday to remember. Mission accomplished. Emma tugged on her mother's sleeve. Mama, why are you sad? Sarah knelt down immediately, pulling her daughter into a fierce hug. Baby, I'm not sad. I'm happy. Sometimes people cry when they're really, really happy. Emma hugged her mother back, then whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. See? I told Lily you could make wishes come true. You're the best mama in the whole world. David had to look away, overwhelmed. This was what mattered, not his stock portfolio or expensive house, but this, the look on Emma's face, the relief in Sarah's eyes, the confirmation that love was enough even when money wasn't. Mrs. Anderson caught his eye and nodded. David took a breath, stood, and approached the counter. "Excuse me," he said gently. Sarah looked up, startled, seeming to recognize him from yesterday. David pressed on. "I'm David Harrison. Mrs. Anderson mentioned you might be interested in some part-time work." Sarah's expression became wary. "What kind of work?" David glanced at Emma, who was examining the cake with serious concentration. "My son turns 10 next month. I need help planning his birthday party. I usually hire a professional, but Mrs. Anderson thought you might be interested. Maybe 15 hours over the next few weeks. Planning, shopping, setup. $40 an hour." Sarah's eyes went wide. 15 hours at $40 was $600, probably 2 weeks of combined work at her current jobs. "I don't have professional experience," she said slowly, but he could see the hunger in her eyes, the desperate hope. "I've never been a party planner." David shrugged. "You just planned a birthday for Emma with $3. I'd say that's more impressive than most professionals could manage. Jake's not a fancy kid. He just wants something fun and real. I think you'd be perfect." Mrs. Anderson chimed in. "I told David you have great taste, Sarah. Simple but special." Sarah looked between them, pride warring with necessity. Finally, she nodded. "Okay. Yes. But I'll earn every penny. I promise." Relief flooded through David. "Great. Can I get your number? I'll call next week to discuss details." She gave him her number, and he entered it carefully. "Thank you," she said, and the weight carried everything, gratitude and suspicion and hope and fear tangled together. Emma, patient long enough, tugged her mother's hand. "Can we go home? I want to show Lily." They left with the massive box, Emma insisting on carrying it herself, and at the door, she turned and waved at David. "Thank you for giving Mama a job." The innocent statement hit hard, as if $600 would be enough to change everything. After they left, David sank into his chair. Mrs. Anderson brought him fresh coffee. "You okay?" He laughed bitterly. "Her daughter thinks $600 will change their life. I spend more than that on shoes." Mrs. Anderson's hand covered his. "David, you can't save everyone. What you can do is help one person in a way that preserves their dignity." "You gave her work, not charity. That matters more than you know." He nodded, the wisdom settling. "You're right. One step at a time." The following Monday, David called Sarah to discuss the party. When she answered, her voice was cautious. "Mr. Harrison?" He smiled. "Please, call me David. Is this good time?" There was rustling, a door closing. "Yes, I'm between shifts. What did you have in mind?" They talked for 35 minutes, Sarah throwing out ideas rapid fire, explaining her reasoning, asking questions about Jake's interests. She suggested a pizza-making party where kids made their own pizzas. Activity-based, not performance-based. Kids that age want to do things, not watch things. David felt genuine excitement. She was really good at this, not from training, but because she actually cared about what would make a child happy. Over the next 3 weeks, they met several times at coffee shops and the bakery. Sarah came prepared to every meeting, had ideas and plans and backup options, treated it with the seriousness he brought to board meetings. She was organized, creative, thoughtful, and David found himself genuinely enjoying her company. She was funny in a dry way, had insights about parenting from lived experience, and never asked for anything beyond their agreement. 2 weeks before the party, Sarah came to see the backyard and figure out logistics. Jake met her then, and David watched nervously, hoping they'd get along. But Jake was enthusiastic about the pizza idea. "My dad usually just hires a magician or something boring. Making our own pizzas sounds way cooler. Emma was with Sarah because her babysitter had canceled, and she'd apologetically asked if it was okay. Emma had been almost invisible, well-behaved and quiet, coloring in the corner. But when Jake showed Sarah his soccer trophies, Emma came over shyly. "You're really good at soccer," she said softly. Jake grinned. "Thanks. Do you play?" Emma shook her head. "Mama can't afford it. But I watch at school during recess." The casual statement hit Jake visibly. His smile faltered, and he looked at the trophies like seeing them differently. Then he looked at his father with sudden awareness. "Well," Jake said carefully, "maybe you could come watch my games, and we could kick the ball around at the park sometimes." Emma's face lit up like Christmas. "Really? Could I, Mama?" Sarah's eyes were bright with tears as she nodded. "If Jake's inviting you, then yes, baby." And just like that, a friendship was born. The children wandered off to play, leaving David and Sarah standing in the backyard. "Your son is wonderful," Sarah said quietly. "You've raised him well. He's kind." David's throat tightened. "So is Emma. She's beautiful, Sarah. You should be proud." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the late afternoon sun. Finally, David spoke. "Sarah, I want to tell you something. 15 years ago, I was you. I was 25, single dad, working 3 jobs, living in a studio with Jake. I was washing dishes at Sweet Haven, and one day I had to ask Mrs. Anderson if she had expired bread. She gave me a birthday cake instead for Jake, told me some customer didn't pick it up. I knew she was lying, but I let her because I needed it." Sarah's eyes went wide, her hand going to her mouth. "The cake yesterday. That was you?" David nodded. "That was me. Standing exactly where you stood, asking the same question. Mrs. Anderson's kindness changed everything. Not the cake itself, but because someone saw me. Someone acknowledged I was trying, that I mattered, that I deserved dignity." He met her eyes. "I didn't offer you this job out of pity. I offered it because I know what it's like to need a break. Because Mrs. Anderson showed me that kindness isn't charity, it's investment." Sarah was crying openly. "I thought I was alone, working 2 jobs and still not enough. I thought everyone else had it figured out." David's eyes were wet, too. "You're not alone. There are millions of us. It's not your fault. The system's broken." Sarah's voice broke. "So what do I do? How did you get from there to here?" David wished he had better answer. "Luck. I got lucky. My tech company caught fire at the right moment. I was smart and hard-working, but so are millions who never catch that break. But what I can do is be for you what Mrs. Anderson was for me." Sarah nodded, wiping tears. "Thank you for being honest, for not pretending it was all just hard work." The day of Jake's party arrived with perfect weather. Sarah had transformed the backyard into a pizza-making paradise, with stations set up, ingredients prepped, aprons for everyone. Kids arrived at 2, and within minutes, chaos erupted in the best way. Sarah moved through the crowd with practiced ease, directing traffic, making sure no one felt left out. Emma followed Jake around, helping where she could, her face glowing. David saw Jake introduce her to friends, make sure she got first pick of toppings, include her without prompting. His son was learning empathy, seeing that circumstances didn't determine worth. The party was chaotic and loud and messy, exactly as it should be. Everyone made pizzas, ate too much, played too rough. Sarah orchestrated everything with quiet competence. As parents arrived for pickup, several approached Sarah with questions about party planning, clearly impressed. David watched her exchange numbers, watched her confidence grow as strangers validated her work. After the last guest left and the kids went inside to play, David helped Sarah pack supplies. "You were amazing today," he said honestly. "Best party Jake's ever had." Sarah's smile was tired but genuine. It was fun. Your son is really special. David pulled an envelope from his pocket. This is your payment. 15 hours at $40. $600. Sarah took it with shaking hands, opened it, and her eyes went wide. Inside was $1,500. She looked up, confused and alarmed. David, this is too much. He raised his hands calmingly. $600 is for your work. The other $900 is from parents who asked for your number. 3 paid me deposits to have you plan their kids' parties. That money is yours. You earned it by being brilliant. Hope and disbelief warred on Sarah's face. 3 more parties? People want to hire me? David grinned. Wealthy people who pay well because they know quality. Sarah, you could actually do this. Make it a real business. You're really good at this. She clutched the envelope, tears streaming. This is enough to quit my night job. With 3 more parties, maybe I could quit both for a while. Focus on this, David encouraged. Then do it. Take the risk. Bet on yourself. Sarah nodded, overwhelmed. She hugged him impulsively, and David hugged back. This woman who felt like a fellow survivor. When they pulled apart, both were crying and laughing. A month later, David sat in Sweet Haven with Mrs. Anderson, catching her up. Sarah had quit her night job, scaled back to part-time at the grocery store. She'd planned 3 more parties, each more successful. Word was spreading. Jake and Emma were inseparable, spending Saturdays at soccer and weeknights doing homework together. Sarah was sleeping regular hours, eating actual meals, looking less like she was about to collapse. You did good, Mrs. Anderson said, patting his hand. This is exactly what I hoped when I gave you that cake 15 years ago. That you'd remember. That you'd pass it on. The bell chimed, and Sarah and Emma entered. Emma ran to the counter where Jessica greeted her with a high five. But today, Sarah didn't pull out $3. She pulled out a 20 and told Emma to pick whatever she wanted. Emma's eyes went wide, and she carefully selected cupcakes. 1 for herself, 1 for her mother, 1 for Jake. Sarah came to David's table while Emma chatted with Jessica. I wanted to thank you again. I have 12 parties booked through summer. I hired an assistant. I'm making more money than I thought possible. It's all because you gave me a chance. David smiled. You earned every bit. I just opened a door. You walked through it. Sarah hesitated, then pulled something from her purse. A small envelope. David opened it to find 3 $1 bills, carefully smoothed. The same $3 Sarah had paid for Emma's cake. Attached was a note in careful handwriting. For someone who might need expired cake. Love, Emma and Sarah. David's vision blurred. When he looked up, Sarah's eyes were wet too. We want to pay it forward. The way Mrs. Anderson did for you. The way you did for us. We want to leave these for the next person who walks in desperate. To tell them they're not alone. That there's hope. Mrs. Anderson came over with tissues, dabbing her own eyes. You 2 are going to make me cry all over my pastries. This is beautiful. This is exactly right. She took the $3 gently, almost reverently, and walked to the register. Above it, she taped the bills and note where everyone could see. A reminder. A promise. A beacon for the next desperate parent who would walk through that door someday. Asking for expired cake and needing so much more. Emma came back, oblivious to adult emotions. Mama, can we go to the park? Jake's waiting. Sarah ruffled her daughter's hair. Yes, baby. Let's go. She looked at David one more time. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. For remembering what it felt like. As they left, David sat with Mrs. Anderson in comfortable silence. Finally, she spoke. You know what's beautiful? Someday, Emma's going to be successful and comfortable, and she'll remember this moment. She'll remember her mama's struggle and your kindness and these $3, and she'll help someone else. That's how it works. That's how we change the world, through small acts that compound over time. David looked at the $3 taped above the register, at the note in a child's handwriting, and felt something profound. This was his real legacy. Not his company or wealth, but this, the ripple effect of kindness, the investment in human dignity. His phone buzzed. Jake texted, "Dad, me and Emma found a soccer camp this summer. Can she come? Her mom said okay if you're cool." David typed back, "Absolutely. Tell Sarah we should split the cost. Partners in making kids happy. Better. Equal. Not charity, but friendship." Mrs. Anderson watched him with knowing eyes. "You're learning. It's not about being the hero. It's about being human with other humans. Nobody saves anybody. We just help each other get through." David nodded, the truth settling deep. What Sarah had needed wasn't a savior, but a partner. Someone who saw her as an equal in different stages of the same journey. The afternoon sun painted everything golden. David thought about the chain of events, Mrs. Anderson's kindness 15 years ago, his desperate question, his improbable success, Sarah's courage, Emma's joy over a cake, none planned, all necessary. "What are you thinking?" Mrs. Anderson asked. David smiled. "About how much power there is in really seeing people, not looking past them, but acknowledging their humanity, their worth. Sarah asked for expired cake, but what she really needed was for someone to say, 'I see you, and you matter.' That's what you did for me, what I tried to do for her. And now, she's doing it for the next person." Mrs. Anderson nodded slowly. "That's the secret. We're all connected. My success is tied to yours, is tied to Sarah's. You can't opt out of community. You can only pretend you have, and that makes you smaller, lonelier. But when you lean in, when you remember we're all just people trying to survive this beautiful, brutal life, that's when magic happens." David stood, leaving cash for coffee and a generous tip. "I should go. Jake and Emma are probably wondering where I am." Mrs. Anderson walked him to the door. "David Harrison, you turned out exactly as I hoped. Rich in all the ways that matter." He hugged her, this woman who'd changed his life with a single act of kindness. As he walked to his car, David passed the window where the $3 were taped, visible from outside. He paused, imagining the next desperate parent who would see them, who would realize they weren't alone, who would ask for help and receive dignity. The cycle continuing, the kindness compounding. He drove to the park where Jake and Emma were playing soccer, their laughter carrying across the grass. Sarah sat on a bench, her face relaxed and peaceful in a way it hadn't been 2 months ago. When she saw him, she waved, and he waved back, and in that simple gesture was everything: friendship and gratitude, and mutual respect, and the relief of not being alone anymore. He sat beside her, and together they watched the children play. Neither said anything because nothing needed saying. They understood each other. They'd walked the same path. They were proof that kindness compounded, that dignity mattered, that the best thing you could do with success was remember where you came from and reach back to help. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades Emma would love. Jake and Emma were teaching each other trick shots, their friendship easy and genuine, untainted by economic realities that had tried to keep them separate. And David Harrison, single-father billionaire who'd heard everything in that bakery 2 months ago, understood finally what Mrs. Anderson had been teaching. The point of having everything wasn't to keep it. It was to share it. Not from obligation or guilt, but from simple human recognition that we're all connected, all struggling, all deserving of dignity and hope, and the occasional beautiful birthday cake that says someone sees us, someone cares, someone believes we matter. The expired cake had never been about the cake. It had been about the question underneath, Do I matter? Am I worth helping? Is there still hope? And the answer, David had learned, was always yes. Always. For everyone. That was the legacy worth building. Not an empire of money, but an empire of kindness. One person at a time. One act of dignity at a time. Until everyone knew what Sarah and Emma knew now, what he and Jake had learned, what Mrs. Anderson had always understood, that we save each other, or we save no one at all.